What is happening, everybody? Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. Hope you all had a great weekend. It is time to get the week started now. Going to be talking about MLB. Then right after this, as you guys know the schedule at this point of the year, but just letting you know anyway, we got MLB Live Before Lock for the next hour. Then we got NBA Live Before Lock with Josh and Eric. And then the playback show where myself and Josh are going to sweat out the basketball games and see what goes on there. We'll be watching the games over on playback. If you guys want to join us there later. Until we get there, though, Matt and I got to be breaking down the top pitchers, the top stacks today, build some lineups here, answer any questions you guys have. If you can do us a favor as you're watching, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're sponsored by Underdog, who have a new deal going on over there. They used to be doing a $100 deposit match bonus, but now it's up to $250, and it is a 50% deposit match bonus. So if you guys haven't signed up at Underdog, you now have an opportunity to get $250 in bonus dollars over there as opposed to the $100 offer. If you are looking to sign up at Underdog, sign up using the link that we have below in the description box. Matt, what's happening? How was Mother's Day?
Mother's Day was good, eventful. So happy to be here talking to you about some baseball and not with actual people in person. But yeah, it was good, man. I'm sorry to hear about your food poisoning incident. I suppose your weekend was good up until then.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I did get food poisoning over the weekend, but nothing some diarrhea can't cure. Had, one bad night. And then yesterday, I just got to do nothing and sleep most of the day to recover. So it wasn't really the end of the world, but yeah, feeling all good today and excited. We got a confirmed starting pitcher for the Dodgers, which earlier in the day when Lofty and I were doing the strategy show, it was unknown who was going to be starting for the Dodgers. If it was going to be Yamamoto, if it was going to be Gavin Stone. We did have Yamamoto in our projections earlier today, and it has been confirmed that Yamamoto is going to be the starter tonight for the Los Angeles Dodgers. That adds a pretty big wrinkle to the slate relative to earlier in the day, because whether it's Yamamoto starting or if it was going to be Gavin Stone, that's going to make a pretty big difference in terms of some of the pitchers that we're going to be getting to, because Yamamoto is a pitcher that I like quite a bit for today. And that's where we're going to start here, Matt, is by talking about some of the spend up pitchers that we have on the slate. And there's a handful of them. It's a 12-game slate. There's a lot of different spots to look at. And if you look right now at the pitchers who are 9K or more expensive, we've got 5 of them. We've got George Kirby. He's projected for 29% ownership. Then we've got pretty much no ownership going to Mitch Keller. He's 0.5% owned. Nobody's clicking on that button. Then we've got Ronaldo Lopez and Shota Imanaga. They're both sub 10% ownership. They're coming in at 8% each. Then we got Yamamoto. He's the popular pitcher at the way high end of the pricing range, 10,500. He's projected for 22% ownership. What do you make of the pay-up options today?
Yeah, I think that it's Yamamoto and then everyone else as far as the spend-up options go. I think he's the best pitcher on the slate. He's up there in price. We saw how that worked out with Wheeler yesterday, but great ballpark for Yamamoto. The Giants are missing one of their best overall hitters in Jung-Hoo Lee. I like Yamamoto a lot here. Kind of surprised he's not the top overall pitcher in the tools, but it's really, really muddled. So I think that you can make the case that he's the best pitcher on the slate pretty easily. As far as the guy getting the most ownership, Kirby, also like him quite a bit. I think that he comes with more risk than Yamamoto. He's also significantly cheaper, but I understand the ownership because it's not a perfect spot. Kansas City doesn't strike out a ton, but it's a good ballpark. He's at home. You're not scared of this Royals lineup, and he's just a good pitcher. So I get the Kirby love. I just don't think the options are that good behind Yamamoto. So I do think those two guys stand out. How about yourself?
Yeah, and I guess we should probably include Brady Singer as part of this conversation too. I know I said all the pitchers who are 9K or more, but Brady Singer's $8,800, and he's also projected for 24% ownership. So just in the interest of grouping together some of the popular pitchers, because we only have, 5 pitchers on the entire slate that have north of 20% ownership, and 3 of them are in this price range, being Yamamoto, George Kirby, and we'll add Singer to the mix as well. But where does Singer fit into the picture for you? One thing that is notable about Yamamoto being confirmed as a starter is Singer has gone from being 30% owned that he was at earlier in the day down to 24%. So it has cut into his ownership a little bit. Does Singer being in this group of pitchers change who your priorities are in any way?
Not really. I hate that Singer's getting so much ownership here. Like, I get it. It's the thing we've been talking about all year, where it's just a matchup against Seattle. But Singer, his underlines aren't as good. Seattle has gotten going a little bit recently. I don't really feel comfortable with Singer's ownership here. He's never been a high strikeout guy. I'd much rather just play Kirby at the same price point. I guess you could make a case for playing both of them together because I don't really love any of the options behind Yamamoto or Kirby, frankly. But I'm probably out on Singer at that price and ownership combined.
Yeah, so for me, if I have the ability to get up to Yamamoto, he's the guy. He's the one that I want to get to the most. The problem is going to be, though, he's more expensive. He's 10,500, so he's $1,500 more expensive than Kirby, $1,700 more than Brady Singer. So ideally, Yamamoto's the guy I want to get to. Great pitchers park on the road against San Francisco. Yamamoto also is the one who I think is, of all the pitchers on the slate, I know that Imanaga's had a crazy good start to the year. I still think ultimately Yamamoto is going to prove to be the more talented pitcher of the two. And I
With
mean,
you.
there's a reason why he was the sought after free agent and he signed for way, way more money than Imanaga did. There's a certain conversation to be had about, is Imanaga on a per dollar basis a better value on the contract that he has than Yamamoto? I would say yes, he probably is. But if all things are being considered, they're equal, I'm going to go towards Yamamoto. And then for this slate in particular, Yamamoto is pitching against Imanaga's on the road against the Braves in a very hitter friendly ballpark. So I know that Imanaga has been consistently terrific this year, but this is by far the toughest spot he's been in. And I would rather be getting to Yamamoto. So if I'm going to rank the chalk pitchers in this range, it's Yamamoto 1, Kirby 2, Singer 3.
Yeah, same. And for me, Singer versus Kirby is easy. Like you look at their actual numbers, and it seems like Singer is having a better year than Kirby. Singer right now comes into the night with a 2.37 ERA. Kirby comes in with a 4.15 ERA. Singer's expected ERA though is 4.01, and Kirby's is 3.31. They're the same price. I think the matchups are similar, maybe slightly higher upside against Seattle because they strike out so much, but I still think Seattle's lineup is better than Kansas City's. I think Kirby's the better pitcher at home. Give me Kirby all day there.
And then between Lopez, Imanaga, Mitch Keller, do you have interest in any of the three contrarian pay up options?
Totally with you on Yamamoto versus Imanaga. Like, yeah, right now it certainly looks like he's the better signing per, dollar for dollar, but I'd much rather have Yamamoto going forward. Comes over with so much pedigree, one of the best pitchers in the world for a while. So not really. Those guys are expensive enough. And Imanaga, easily the toughest spot he's been in. So I'm with you 100% here.
Let's move down a little bit in the pricing here. And yeah, for me, Lopez, Imanaga, this is a big slate, 12 games. We got a lot of spots to choose from. And it doesn't really appear that any of those guys are going to be making into my lineups outside of like a one-off here or there. One other piece of information just to keep note of as we go through here, guys. We've got the Nationals White Sox game. There is some weather concern in that spot. And the reason that's going to be important is that we do have the Washington Nationals currently projected to be the chalkiest offense on the slate by a really wide margin. So as of right now, totally cool to leave the game in the player pool. There's nothing I'm hitting the eject button on, but I'm going to be paying close attention to that weather because it could certainly end up being a concern a little bit later. Anything that you would add to the weather there?
No, I think you just said it very eloquently.
All right, so let's look at the rest of the pitchers in. Let's just group everybody together that's in this 8 to 7K range. So going from Cutter Crawford all the way down to Colin Ray. So the $7,100, $8,600 price range, this is making up the bulk of the pitchers on the slate. And most of them aren't picking up ownership really at all. We've only got 3 guys in this range that are projected for double-digit ownership. That is Christopher Sanchez at 14.5% ownership. We've got Spencer Arrighetti at 10.9% ownership. And then Sean Manaea against the Phillies. I cannot believe how popular Sean Manaea has gotten to be on this slate. 22% projected ownership going into Sean Manaea against a Phillies offense that is a very, very good offense. I mean, the pitching staff has been ridiculous as well. The Phillies might quietly actually be the best team in baseball right now when you combine what their offense is with the fact that their rotation between, we've got how many of these pitchers, Lofty and I were going through it before, that are at the top of the Cy Young odds? We have, pulling it up right now,
Wheeler and Suarez are probably maybe the top two of the top 3 for sure.
Wheeler's the favorite. Suarez is now at 9 to 1, I think, on FanDuel. He is, yeah. So you got Wheeler plus 350, Suarez is plus 900, and then Nola is actually at 60 to 1 now. But I mean, Nola's also been very good this year. So you got three guys who are in like the top 10 of the Cy Young conversation. And then you got other guys thrown in the mix like Christopher Sanchez, who's been not great, but very solid for a back end rotation pitcher. Anyway, those are the only three guys that are picking up any kind of ownership. Are you surprised starting with Sean Manaea just because he's the most popular of this group? They just projected for 22% ownership against the Phillies.
Yeah, very surprised. I mean, you can miss me with that. Like, the only thing I get about it is that Philly is a little beat up with no Schwarber, or maybe he's back tonight. I don't think their lineups come out yet. And the bottom of their lineup isn't great. Braxton Garrett struck out a bunch of them yesterday, but I think Braxton Garrett is the much better DFS pitcher than Manaea right now. And Manaea is getting ownership. I don't get it. Like, I'm off Manaea here. Sanchez, I think he's fine. I'd much rather play him over Manaea, considering their ownership. He's also pricier, so probably wouldn't play him, but considering the ownership, I'd much prefer him to Manaea. And then Arrighetti, like, don't love him on paper and thought he'd be pulling more ownership, but he's not. Oakland's been good against righties recently, but it's kind of a pick your poison type slate after Yamamoto and maybe Kirby. There's no one you feel great about. Arrighetti's cheap at home against Oakland. He's the top overall pitcher in our tools. 15.6% chance of being a top two guy. 11% ownership. Like, I think Arrighetti's my favorite by far in that group. Then Sanchez, then Manaea. How about you?
Yeah, and by the way, we do have the Phillies starting lineup, and it's a watered down lineup. There is no Real Muto, there is no Schwarber. So the order it's Merrifield, Bohm, Harper, Castellanos, Bryson Stott, Edmundo Sosa, Brandon Marsh, Johan Rojas, and then Garrett Stubbs hitting ninth there. So it is a watered down version of their lineup, but not to the point where I'd be like, oh, cool, let's load up on Sean Manaea now. That's not really how I view this slate. I think he's coming in a little bit overowned, and I'm getting to him in lineups. It's just less than what the field has as far as Sean Manaea is concerned. So if I'm looking at these pitchers in this price range, for me, number one is also going to be Arrighetti. I'm happy that his ownership came down. It was something Lofty and I were talking about this morning where we were speculating he was going to be more popular as the day went on. We were doing the strategy show this morning. He was 14% owned. And then you go refresh things as we got closer to live before lock. And now he's just over 10% is Arrighetti. So I'm going to go Arrighetti 1, Christopher Sanchez 2, Sean Manaea 3. The big thing with Arrighetti is there's strikeout upside here. And I don't feel good about him as he's terrible. He's not been good this year. He wasn't good in the minor leagues last year either. But the one thing that's been consistent about Arrighetti is that he generates strikeouts. At the big league level, he's generating strikeouts. At the minor leagues, he was generating strikeouts. So you look at him this year, 24% K rate in the minor leagues last year, 27% K rate in 2023 in AA, 31.2% in 2022 in AA, 35% K rate in A-ball in 2022, 32% K rate. So the guy gives up a lot of runs, but he also generates strikeouts, and he's going up against an Oakland team that's the fourth highest strikeout rate in the league against right-hand pitching. Now, the offense has been better than expected this year. The A's have a 102 WRC plus against righties, but there's also this narrative that it's like, oh my God, this A's offense is actually really good. That's not exactly the case. It's just the bar was so low for them coming into the season that the fact that they've been an average offense a quarter of the way through the season, that it makes it seem like they're much better than they are. I'm interested in both sides of this game. It was the same take I had earlier in the day where if Arrighetti is somewhat successful today, it's going to come through strikeouts, and he's cheap enough and low owned enough that he could really make a difference in GPPs. But I'm also going to want to stack against him a little bit because he's an 8.44 ERA, a 5.67 expected ERA, and he also always got hit hard in the minor leagues, even though he generated all those strikeouts. So as far as tournament plays go, like I would never play Arrighetti in a cash game. For tournaments, though, it's hard to not recognize there's upside here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I probably wouldn't play him in a cash game either, but I do think he looks good. I mean, relative to what the ownership is at and his price tag. And yeah, like he's not a good pitcher. I think he's a little bit better than his numbers bear out. Like his expected numbers aren't good, but they're a little bit better than his actual numbers. And I'm with you about Oakland. They have been good against right-handed pitching recently, but doesn't mean they're going to be that good going forward. So I think a lot of the hype is, like you said, just because they were so bad at the beginning of the year. But yeah, I'm also with you. I think Oakland pieces are in play. I don't really love them as a full stack here. I like them as one-offs or mini stacks. Tyler Soderstrom is hitting fifth. He's like 2,100 first base and catcher eligible. Like him quite a bit. But I'm with you. Just at the respective ownership, I think Arrighetti is under-owned.
Yeah, and people in the chat, I already see people like, he's terrible. I totally agree he's terrible. It's just their strikeout upside here. And sometimes for something like DFS, he could go out. He might even have a start where he pitches 5 innings and gives up 4 runs, but has like 8 strikeouts and ends up being a good value. So I think both sides of the game make sense for tournament purposes. Not going to be touching him in a cash game as a recommendation or anything like that. Are there any contrarian options in this pricing range that are standing out to you?
The tools would suggest that like Jordan Hicks is in play, and I wrote him up as the contrarian pitcher because he's just getting no love. 7.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, under 1% ownership. I can't do it against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are also getting under or aren't getting enough love. So both sides are in playing tournaments. If I were multi-entering, I would be overweight on Hicks just because it's so easy to, knowing it's such a risky spot. You look at these pitchers, though, I think he's right there with Sanchez as the best actual pitcher of the bunch. So I don't hate that if you're like, deep diving for contrarian options, but nothing more than that. How about you?
Yeah, let me look through the exposures I have here. Is there anything I'm finding myself to in this price range? Because my initial thought is no. And looking at my exposures, yes, like there's individual pitchers I can make a case for. The problem is with it being a 12-game slate, I go back, I check my exposures in the Sims, my top 150 lineups, and it's like, hey, a 1% on Jordan Montgomery at home against the Cincinnati Reds. That is some interest to me. But then I open up my lineups, like, but I have 3% of Jordan Montgomery. So, like, do I want to come on here and tell people to roster somebody who I have 3% of across 150 lineups? And the answer to that is, not really. Same, Colin Ray, he's 4% owned at $7,100. Could he be a serviceable value option? Yeah, for sure. But there's a lot of these guys who it's like, oh, this guy's viable and he's 2-3% owned, and I have him in a lineup or two, but no real priorities. I mean, even like Shum and I'm going to have in some lineups, but I'm just going to be underweight to what his actual projected ownership is. The player I'm most interested in being overweight to here is Arrighetti, and it's probably going to go poorly because he sucks. But hey, just kind of the buttons you have to press sometimes.
Yeah, 100% with you. I think you broke it down perfectly.
All right, let's see what questions that we have here in the Discord channel. I'm seeing a couple of them come through. One is from Kapanakella. He wants to know who it is we're looking at for single entry. We'll talk about that probably in like 5-10 minutes or so when we start talking about stacks and build lineups in the lineup generator. And then, hey, I'm Drew asked us, who should we be rostering for cash games today? Pitchers, stacks, what are we going to be going after? All right, I think this is a very interesting discussion for cash games today because we've got a pitcher that we're about to be talking about in Randy Vasquez on the low end, who I think you absolutely have to play in cash games. The question becomes, which pitcher do you want to pair him with? Although maybe I'll say this, would you want to play Randy Vasquez in a cash game, or is there somebody else you have your eye on, Matt?
Nah, I think you got to play him in cash games because the ownership's there, and you don't need that much from him in cash games because the ownership's there, and it just allows you to spend up elsewhere. So Vasquez, and I think it's either Kirby or Yamamoto. Maybe Kirby because he's cheaper, but I think it's one of those two. I don't really have a strong preference. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to say Vasquez and Yamamoto, with the caveat being that if you can't find the salary to get up to Yamamoto, no issue going to George Kirby in cash games instead. If you can, go to Yamamoto. If not, cool. And just go Randy Vasquez with George Kirby. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable lineup. But Yamamoto, if you possibly could. Offenses target in cash games, that's kind of tricky just because the ownership is so spread out that I think there's a number of different ways you could go. There's not like one individual team I'd be looking to stack. I would say that if you pay up for some individual bats, like I think some of the Houston hitters look good against Ross Stripling today. I think some of the Dodgers hitters are acceptable against Jordan Hicks. I'd lean more towards the Houston Astros, though. Nationals hitters, if the weather ends up checking out, but I do think the Astros are probably the team that I feel have the best combination of upside as well as acceptable price point. But getting back to some of the pitchers here, Matt, what are you going to do in tournaments with Randy Vasquez? He's very cheap. He's also not particularly good, but he's very cheap. He has some strikeout upside. He's pitching against a terrible Colorado Rockies offense. What do you make of him at 31% projected ownership, though?
Real quick on the cash game take, I'm with you. I do think that you just probably lock in Tyler Soderstrom, as I just mentioned and before, didn't even realize, but he's projected to be the highest owned hitter on the slate. So I think he's a really good cash game play because he's so cheap. To your point or your question on Vasquez, I don't love it because he's not good and he's so popular, but you get this putrid Rockies lineup on the road, about as big as a ballpark, downgrade as you can get. He's been serviceable and it's a matchup and price thing. So while I don't feel great about it, I get it. And I might end up playing a little bit of him just because of the price point. How about you?
Yeah, it's hard to get away from him just because of what the matchup is. It's the Colorado Rockies on the road. Vasquez is not good. He's not terrible either. He's just kind of a guy that exists. He's not a ranked prospect. He has a 4.5 ERA, 4.1 expected ERA, 5.55 FIP this year. Pretty much all projection models have this guy as like a middling strikeout pitcher who has a fair talent level of like a mid to low fours ERA, like a 4.3 to 4.5 sort of range on him. And more often than not, that's going to get the job done against this just terrible, stupid Colorado Rockies offense when they're away from Coors Field. So he's a piece of chalk that I'm going to find very difficult to get away from, not just because of the matchup, but there's no comparable pivot either. There's nobody else on this low end I look to and be like, oh, I could go to this guy as a pivot instead of Randy Vasquez. If I have a lineup that's an expensive offense and I need to go cheap, I mean, I'm not going to Soriano or Stripling or Flexen or Dakota Hudson. It's really Vasquez is the only guy I like on the low end.
I'm with you, but I also don't hate the idea of like in large field tournaments playing, a little bit more of like a Flexen or Trevor Williams and maybe getting a little bit under on Vasquez. I don't know. Vasquez isn't good, like you mentioned. So while I do think he's the best option out of all these guys, I don't think it's so wide where he should be getting so much more ownership than everyone else. I probably won't do anything with that because I'm playing so few lineups. But again, if I were multi-entering, maybe I'd sprinkle in a little bit more of those cheap guys. Wouldn't be excited about it, but maybe I'd do it.
Yeah. And I mean, the 31% ownership, I think it's more or less fair. We have with a 27% chance to be one of the top two value pitchers on this slate, which is much more important than the top odds of being a top scoring pitcher. Because how often are you expecting a guy who's 6K to actually score like the most fantasy points on the slate? So you see how high the top value odds are. And if you are going to be paying up for an offense, maybe being contrarian and going to like the Dodgers, for instance, you kind of need the salary savings that Randy Vasquez brings to the table. If you were pivoting off of him, any of these other cheap pitchers of interest to you?
Not really, but I think I would go to Flexen. Don't love the matchup, don't hate it either. He's a little bit cheaper. Weather's an issue though, so probably not. I think there's enough ways to get different with offenses. So yeah, I don't love the Vasquez ownership, but I'm more or less with you on it.
Yeah, I know there's people who are going to want to play Jose Soriano, mostly because of the fact that he's pitching against this Cardinals offense, which has just been terrible as of late. The other day, you and I did a show together. You were on the right side of it. I was on the wrong side of it, where they were very low owned going up against a fairly chalky pitcher. His name is slipping me at the moment. Pitcher was making his debut on Friday.
Gasser.
Right, Robert Gasser. That's correct. So Robert Gasser was going and he pitched well, and the Cardinals offense was just absolutely terrible. This Cardinals offense, it cannot be this bad going forward. They're not going to be good. But there's not a chance that like Paul Goldschmidt was like, oh, for the entire month of May, as was who were the other two hitters that also it was Gorman and
Carlson.
Yeah, so it was Paul Goldschmidt, Carlson, and Gorman were 0 for the month of May, a week and a half in. It's just like incredibly, impossibly bad numbers. They actually finally were decent yesterday. I played the Cardinals again in single entry yesterday. I was like, hey, they didn't totally wreck me on yesterday's slate. But Soriano, 4.32 ERA, 4.6 expected ERA. I do think some people are going to want to click on him because of that matchup against the Cardinals. I have him in 4% of my top 150 lineups right now. He's projected for 4% ownership. I've got the same amount as the field does. If he's in a lineup or two, that's fine. I don't really want to prioritize him, though. I don't think he's particularly good. And I also get concerned about how deep he's able to work into games.
I was gonna say you sound like someone who's played a bunch of Cardinals recently, but I'm totally with you here. Like, I'm not on Soriano. The Cardinals, I could see myself playing some Cardinals here. I wish Soriano were getting more love, but I actually think he might because of everything you said. So we see this eye to eye.
Yeah, he's just had some starts recently. Like his last time out, he went 4 2/3 innings. He did have the one start where he went 6 innings against Cleveland, but the start before that against the Minnesota Twins, he only went 1 2/3 innings. So he's this guy who's a very short leash, and if he gets into any sort of trouble, they're very quick to take him out of games. So if you have him in a lineup or two, totally fine. I wouldn't build my lineups around Soriano, and I don't really see another real viable cheap guy that I'd be loving to get to. You mentioned Chris Flexen, which, yeah, the Nationals are fairly popular, so you can make a case for it from a leverage standpoint. But at the same time, too, the Nationals being the most popular offense on the slate, I mean, they're projected for 10% ownership. The ownership is really flat, which kind of kills some of that leverage. So I'm going to check Discord really quick to see if anybody has any more pitcher questions. But if not, we'll check out the FanDuel pitchers, and then Jordan will build some lineups in the lineup generator. So no other questions that are in there right now. If you guys do have questions in Discord for me, just at me so I could see them. One of the perks being a Stochastic member is you do get access to our Discord channel. On the FanDuel side of things at pitching, Matt, if you were paying up for one pitcher on FanDuel, who would be the guy that you would go to? The pricing is slightly different on FanDuel, but the high-end guys are actually more or less the same.
Yeah, I think it's like the same thing. Yamamoto is the preferred option. If you can't get to him, I don't mind dropping down to Kirby, but I see it about the same. And I don't like Singer as much as the other two. So yeah, it's those two. I think you could make a similar case for Arrighetti as we're making on DraftKings. More risky because it's a one pitcher site, but the price discount is big on FanDuel. So yeah, see it basically the same. How about you?
Yeah, my favorite high-end pitcher is Yamamoto on FanDuel. My favorite low-end pitcher, Randy Vasquez, is the fourth cheapest pitcher on FanDuel. And one thing that is, well, two things that are different about Vasquez on FanDuel relative to DraftKings. I do get concerned whether Vasquez is going to be able to make it through 5 innings because he typically also doesn't work very deep into games. So it would certainly suck if he's not able to get the win bonus. But he's 7K on FanDuel, and I do think some of the risk of him not working deep into game is offset by the fact that he's contrarian on FanDuel. He's only projected for 5% ownership. So it's kind of the same pitchers, but for different reasons. Yamamoto is my favorite pay up option on FanDuel. Vasquez is my favorite cheap option to go to. Fourth cheapest pitcher on the slate, only project for 5% ownership.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. I think that, I guess Arrighetti, like, just stands out in the tools for me as just a really good option here. So I feel you on your points about Vasquez as well. I think both those guys look kind of similar, but ideally I'd spend up. So see this eye to eye.
The ownership is also crazy spread out a pitcher on FanDuel. The most popular pitcher on FanDuel is Brady Singer, and he's projected for 14.7% ownership. Then you got Yamamoto at 14.1%, Kirby 12.7%, Manaya 10.6%, Christopher Sanchez is 8.8%, Imanaga 7.1%. I mean, these are the most popular pitchers. There's nobody more popular than 15% owned, and there's only 4 pitchers that even have double-digit ownership over on FanDuel. So whoever it is that your guys have as a favorite option, they're not going to be very popular. So you really could go ahead and play your favorite pitcher relative to price, and you don't have to worry about it being like too chalky or anything like that because pitcher ownership is really spread out on FanDuel. Any general final thoughts on pitcher before we start looking at lineups and lineup generator?
I don't think so. Kind of an ugly pitcher slate unless you're spending up. Like, I guess the one thing we didn't really talk about, what about spending up on both Yamamoto and Kirby?
I think it's going to be a little bit hard to do just because of the price points. I'm sure I'll have some lineups that might be like an Oakland A's stack where I get fit in both of them. But outside of that, and I will have some Oakland A's stacks that I think that's a good stack to be getting to, just as it's good to be playing Arrighetti in tournaments today. But outside of a super cheap stack like the Oakland A's or maybe the Chicago White Sox against Trevor Williams, I don't even really think it's viable to be able to play lineups with them together.
Yeah, the A's, and also the reason I mention it is the Cardinals too, kind of work in that. So I don't know. Obviously if you can make it happen, do it, but that wouldn't go out of your way to fit them both in. I'm with you.
All right, so let's build some lineups in the lineup generator. If you guys want to sign up for any of the packages we have here at Stochastic, sign up using the links that we have below in the description box. It is also any package you sign up for, you get access to our Discord channel. And we got our Edwards promo going on right now, which is going to be expiring at the end of the week. So only, a few days left to sign up here. But if you guys are looking to get NBA access to our NBA Sims tools, you could sign up right now with the promo code Edwards. The promo code is already loaded in to that link that we have below in the description box. And for just $19.99, you guys see a win that Jake DeWitt had the other day. So Jake's in chat. I think he said he's off from work for paternity leave. So shout out to Jake and congratulations there. But yeah, sign up using the link we have below. Less than $20 to get access to our NBA Sims Max package for 1 week. So good way to try it out here before the end of the NBA regular season. We've got about a month or so left of games here. So go check that out if you guys haven't already and you're interested in getting our NBA package for a discount. We're going to build lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel here, but let's start with DraftKings, Jordan. Go all stack types and just go balanced. The ownership is so spread out today that I'm not even sure how much it would matter which setting we end up taking there. But yeah, save a bunch of these, then we'll go ahead and we'll look at what the exposures are like afterwards. All right. And yeah, all of the Randy Vasquez. So let's start by looking at the pitchers, which it's Randy Vasquez coming in the most of everybody. Not all that surprised by that. Followed by Spencer Arrighetti. I am surprised by the amount of Shomanai that we're getting to because I personally don't like him all that much. But hey, he is popular today. Field seems to be getting to him. But the ownership is spread out beyond Randy Vasquez, who's showing up the most here. Arrighetti, Minaya, Christopher Sanchez, George Kirby, Brady Singer. These guys are all showing up in about the same amount of lineups. Goes to show that our data is kind of split on which pitchers are the best to get to, as is the field, which makes sense. But Randy Vasquez standing out above everybody else. Click on the stack exposures, Jordan. It does look like we're getting, a decent amount of Washington, but also pretty spread out here. Can you remember a time we've done this, Matt, where we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 offenses that we have double-digit exposure to? It's spread out. There's a lot of different options to go to. We've got Houston in 34% of lineups, Washington in 26%, and then it kind of gets spread out beyond there. Is there one particular offense you like more than every other offense today?
If I had to answer that question, I do think it's really spread out, and you could make a case for a bunch of offenses here. My favorite would be Houston at home against Ross Stripling. They got going a bit yesterday. They're really expensive, though. So pricing considered, I think that answer can change. But, pricing and ownership agnostic, I like Houston as just the top offense on the slate. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck trying to figure out what it is that I want to play in single entry. We got the question from Captain Akella, who asked, what's a good single entry stack and who are we playing in three max tournaments? It's hard. There's no leverage. There's no one stack that stands out above the rest. Our highest top stack team right now, I'll refresh to make sure none of the data has changed since we started doing the show, but it is, still the same. Cleveland Guardians, a 6.9% chance to be the top scoring team, followed by the Houston Astros at 6.8%. It's so incredibly flat that it's hard to single out any one team as the team to get to. So I'm not totally settled on which team it is I want to stack, but if I was entering my lineup right now, I'd be most inclined to go to the Houston Astros.
Yeah, we see this like the same, but man, I like the idea of Oakland, but seeing that they're expected to be the second highest owned team behind only Washington definitely has me like an Arrighetti.
Yeah, and Ross Stripling is not good. His underlying numbers better than his actual numbers, but we've seen enough of Ross Stripling over the years to know that he's probably not going to be all that great going forward. When he pitches out of the bullpen, he generally finds some success. So you could look at some years for Ross Stripling and kind of you could get tricked into thinking he's kind of been okay. But a lot of those years you have to look at, well, it's like, oh, he made half his appearances out of the bullpen, half as a starter. And when he's a starter, he's going to have worse numbers than when he is or he's going to have worse numbers when he's just a starter compared to when he's splitting time between a starter and a reliever. So just pulled up his career splits, and you'll see that he's a guy who, when he starts, he strikes out a little bit less hitters. He gives up a little bit more hard contact, a little bit more home runs. So Ross Stripling is somebody who I'm pretty comfortable stacking against with the Houston Astros. And then also, I think this is a good buy low spot for Houston. this is the bottom for them. I don't think going forward, we're going to be like, oh, look, this team actually only won 60 games this year or anything like that. Jordan Alvarez is going to play better going forward. Alex Bregman is going to hit better going forward as well. They've had individual guys like Kyle Tucker's been good. Jose Altuve's been good. But we know this is one of the most talented offenses in baseball. They just haven't played like it so far. So going forward, I think they're going to be fine. And that is the team I'm most inclined to play in single entry right now, Matt.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's man, you're kind of pigeonholed into playing Vasquez if you play Houston and use all their good hitters because they're really, really expensive. I will say, team like Cleveland maybe looks a little bit better than Houston in, as far as the tools go and actually rostering them. Now, I'm with you. I expect Houston to be better than Cleveland going forward. They're just a better lineup. Doesn't mean it's going to happen tonight. In Cleveland, it's the top overall stack in our tools. Lorenzen has shown that he can give it up, and they're not getting a lot of love. So Cleveland also looks pretty good. They're not overly expensive either.
Yeah. And is there any team you're really concerned about the ownership of in single entry sort of stuff? Because I mean, I can't remember that many slates we've had where no team is projected for more than 10% ownership. So maybe Washington gets some love, but there's also the weather concerns. Like, I can't imagine this is going to be a 30% owned team or anything like that. I think the ownership, even in single entry, should be somewhat spread out, even if maybe the Nationals get a little bit more steam in those contests.
And actually, I think that's going to go down because the recent weather report came out. It's not looking good for that game. I don't think people are going to want to play either side of that in single entry. So I don't think ownership is really going to be an issue anywhere.
If the ownership goes down, are you going to be willing to take chances on it with the rain, or is it a big enough slate and is it too risky that you just be like, I'll take my chances elsewhere?
Yeah, I'll definitely just take my chances elsewhere. I mean, if Washington or the White Sox, comes out of the blue and the game looks good and they play and beats me, so be it. I'll play tomorrow, but I'm not going out of my way to play this game. I do think it's a spot where maybe you get over the field on if you're multi-entering. How are you going to handle it?
Right now, you know what? Actually, I'm interested to see what the ownership ends up being because right now I'm so underweight to the situation. But the reason I'm primarily underweight is because the ownership is high relatively to other teams on the slate. So, like, for instance, I would rather play the Oakland A's as a stack right now than the Washington Nationals. We get the Oakland A's at 7% ownership, the Nationals at 10% ownership. But that Nationals ownership could be coming down. But if the weather is truly going to be shitty, I think the safest thing that I'm most comfortable recommending to all you guys is the Nationals are already looking like an overowned team. Just look elsewhere with your stacks.
Yeah, so we see this very similarly.
And as far as our current ownership for hitters that we have in here, CJ Abrams, Kyle Tucker, Fernando Tatis, Jordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, John Singleton, Keibert Ruiz. So you are seeing that the individual hitters we're getting to the most are coming from the Washington Nationals as well as the Houston Astros. So no real surprise there, especially when you consider those were the teams we had the most exposure to. But still, if you guys are playing 20 lineups today, it's a pretty good slate to spread out some of your ownership because there isn't one team that looks way superior to everybody else. But yeah, I'll say that right now, the team I think is the best option for single entry is the Houston Astros.
Yeah, I could see the Astros getting more love too, with the Nationals, conceivably not, especially like the good hitters in Houston's lineup. Just sets up too easy to roster Vasquez and the Astros good hitters. That might be the one spot I'd be worried about ownership.
I just realized something. This is basketball related, but I pulled it up. Donovan Mitchell is questionable to play today. He didn't tweet, let him know. Eric's going to be losing his shit on NBA Live Before Lock about this.
He didn't?
He didn't tweet, let him know. Is this a
You're
concern
right,
to you as a Cleveland man?
Slightly. I think there's only been one game where he's tweeted it or not tweeted it, and I don't know what this exact circumstance is, but a little bit concerned, although still time for him to tweet it out. We'll see, I guess.
All right, Jordan, let's build some FanDuel lineups as I text Eric here. And let's see what we're getting to on the FanDuel side of things. So I'm very interested to see what the lineup generator gives us at pitcher on FanDuel because, I mean, like we said before, the most popular pitcher is 14% owned on FanDuel. Let's see what that means for what our Eric just tweeted losing his shit. All right, so it's just status quo for him right now. So one thing I'm noticing right away about our hitters here, a ton of Astros over on FanDuel. Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, Jeremy Pena. Those are 4 of our 5 most popular hitters on the slate, and a ton of exposure to Tucker, Alvarez, and Altuve. Clear on the stack exposures, Jordan. We must have just a ton of Houston Astros in there. Yeah, about half of our lineups are Astro stacks, followed by the Padres in 35% of lineups. So it's not quite the same on FanDuel relative to DraftKings. We're not seeing as many stacks that are showing up in lineups. And also, FanDuel ownership, kind of the same deal. There are no teams that are projected for double-digit ownership on FanDuel. We've got the Astros 9% owned, the Diamondbacks 9.5% owned. I still like the Astros a good amount over on FanDuel, Matt.
Yeah, I think FanDuel looks pretty similar to DK all around, and Houston just in general is the top offense to target here. So yeah, I'm with you.
Let's go back to the player exposures because, like I said, Jordan, I want to review some of the pitchers and see what our ownership is at pitcher. Scroll down because there are nobody. Yeah, look at that. Our most rostered pitcher in the lineup generator here is 17% Randy Vasquez, 15% Christopher Sanchez, 15% George Kirby, 15% Brady Singer, 15% Sean Manaea. We are getting to just a bunch of different pitchers in a couple of lineups. I kind of see it the same way. It's hard to, if you're building a bunch of lineups on FanDuel, it's hard to marry yourself to any one pitcher, Matt.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just that kind of slate. I don't think that anything more needs to be said about it. Like, it's just a lot of options that project and look really similar.
And we got a question in Discord from Einsteinium. He wants to know, how do we feel about the Red Sox and Diamondback stacks today? But any other thoughts on the lineup generator? If not, I think we could close that down, Jordan. Anything else you want to add, Matt?
Mm-mm.
All right, so let's spend the next 10 minutes here going over some of the other stacks we like. We've talked about the ones that are most important to us, but also some of the other fringe type stacks we're looking at or other ones that we have interest in. So Einstein here brought up, how do we feel about the Boston and the Diamondback stacks today? I'm always down to stack against Graham Ashcraft. He's somebody who, if you watch Ashcraft pitch, you'd be like, oh my God, this guy's throwing this cutter. He throws it 100 miles per hour. It looks great by the eye test. And then you look at his numbers, the guy's never been able to generate strikeouts, low swinging strike rate. So for whatever reason, despite all the velocity, his career high strikeout rate is 18.6%. He's just not able to get the swing and misses. He's going up against an Arizona Diamondbacks offense that overall for the year hasn't been great, but they were in the World Series last year. They've returned largely the same lineup. Corbin Carroll was hurt earlier in the year. It does appear like he's hitting the ball a little bit better now than he was earlier. And we do also have the Arizona Diamondbacks with the second overall highest top stack odds on the slate. Modest ownership against Graham Ashcraft. That's definitely a team that I'm interested in. What do you make of the Arizona Diamondbacks?
I like them, don't love them. I much prefer Arizona against left-handed pitching. They're just a much better lineup against lefties. That said, they had Baltimore this weekend. They faced 2 lefties and were just okay, and then went off against Kramer and the Orioles bullpen yesterday. I respect Ashcraft as a pitcher, but certainly like the Arizona side more. I will say, as far as stacks go, we got an update a little bit ago. Washington is now projected for not a lot of ownership at all. And Oakland is the highest owned team on the slate, followed by St. Louis and Houston. I don't know if I want to roster chalky Oakland and St. Louis, even though I get why they're popular.
Yeah, so I mean it's relative though. Like Oakland is 8.7% projected ownership now compared to what were they before this update? Like 7.8% or something.
Yeah, but to that point, I'll say that like a lot of their ownership is coming to guys like Soderstrom and Rooker and Langoliers. Well, mostly Soderstrom and Rooker, who are actually projected to be the 2 highest owned hitters on the slate. Wow.
And BZ425 in chat said, is Oakland the second most owned on DK? They're the most owned on DK now. So for single entry tournaments, I do think we could see Oakland get to be like 15-ish% owned as a team. And some of those individual hitters, like Soderstrom might be like 30% owned in single entry tournaments as a catcher. I think he's going to be crazy, crazy popular.
Same.
this kind of makes me like, I mean, we already liked Arrighetti. I think I like Arrighetti even more in tournaments now.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I'll also say, like, I get why Soderstrom's getting so much love. Arrighetti's not good, and he's just a perfect lineup filler with price tags on hitters and a lot of spots going up. So, yeah, I don't really want to play those cheap Oakland guys, but I understand why they're getting ownership because a lot of spots have been priced up on this slate. So, I don't know. Kind of more surprised, or not surprised, more upset that St. Louis is now projected for more ownership because I also like them. So we'll see. It is all relative to your point. Like, it's not like either of these teams are projected for monster ownership numbers. It just get me worried about guys like you mentioned, Rooker and Soderstrom.
Yeah. So the other part of Einsteinium's question, he asked us if we like the Diamondbacks. That's a yes for me. I like the Diamondbacks. Then he asked us if we like the Boston Red Sox. Boston Red Sox are going to be going up against Zach Eflin. Eflin is not going to be all that popular today. Neither are the Red Sox, but the Red Sox are one of these teams. This happens all the time on 12-game slates. They're projected for 5% ownership. They have 4.4% chance to be the top scoring stack. I go ahead and look at my exposures here, and yeah, I've got 3.5% Red Sox stacks, like right around in line with the field. It's not a team I would prioritize. Zach Eflin's solid, 3.75 ERA, 3.44 expected ERA. If you've got a Red Sox stack or two out of a large portfolio of lineups, that's fine. But I'm not going to prioritize stacking against Zach Eflin, who's been a pretty solid pitcher for a while now. He's had, let's see, a sub-4 expected ERA in every single season he's been in the big leagues since 2019. So with that being the case, I don't really love the Red Sox for this slate. Do you see it any differently?
No, I see it the same. I look at Eflin and the Red Sox as basically the same type of play on the slate. Contrarian with upside that I'm not prioritizing at all.
Let's see these other stacks here. And yeah, I mean, a lot of these teams just like look fair to get to. No real kind of crazy leverage or anything like that. But are there any super low owned teams that you're willing to take a chance on? Here are the teams that are sub 3% owned: the Mariners, the Braves, the Nationals now because of the weather concerns, the Mets, the Rockies, the Royals, the White Sox, the Giants. Any of these super contrarian stacks stand out to you for any particular reason?
The only one that stands out to me is, well, I guess two, the Mariners and the Rockies. So both against popular pitchers. The Mariners offense strikes out a lot, but they have upside surely within that lineup. And then the Rockies, just a playoff Vasquez and his ownership. He's not very good. Once in a blue moon, the Rockies will come through on this slate in a big way. And when they do, it's not going to be hard to be at the top of the field because no one's rostering them.
Yeah, I don't, none of my top 100. Oftentimes I'll be forcing in teams just because of variance of baseball and ownership. But even in this spot, none of my top 150 lineups are Rocky stacks. I've got no exposure to them here. And I'm not going to go out of my way to force myself to play the Rockies for this slate if I don't have to. One of the other issues too with Vasquez is when he struggles, he just has a quick hook. And I do worry that there's a scenario where like he pitches 3 innings, he gives up 3 runs, and they just go to the bullpen. And then it's like, great, now I have to play the Rockies against like a decent-ish bullpen. And that's also not all that appealing once they get into the bullpen arms. So I don't know how much leverage there really is to the Rockies just because Vasquez doesn't have to get like destroyed to be taken out of the game early.
I'm with you there. I mean, that brings up a nice argument to playing Vasquez as well. Not going to lie.
Yeah, it's not the spot particularly that I would want to be getting to. I do agree with you though. If I had to right now build a stack against one of the popular pitchers on the slate, I'd be most inclined to go to the Mariners against Brady Singer. Singer of the popular, he's my least favorite of the high end starting pitchers. And then also you got a Mariners offense that has some power in it. The other one also though is the Philadelphia Phillies. I know that Manaea isn't quite as popular as these other pitchers, but still you've got Sean Manaea who's picking up, a decent amount of ownership against an offense that, while watered down, still has a bunch of good hitters in it.
Bunch of good hitters in it. A bunch of hitters who have seen a lot of Manaea or a decent amount and have good success against him for whatever that's worth. So I'm with you on the Phillies here. Merrifield's 4 for 8 off Manaea. Castellanos is 5 for 8. I'm not playing these guys because of that, but I'm not playing them all either.
Any other thoughts on the offenses or anything today? Because if not, we could do our home run pick, and then we'll get out of here before Eric gets on NBA Live Before Lock and starts melting down about Donovan Mitchell's Twitter account.
No, let's do it. You got one in mind?
Looking right now, and if you guys have any home run calls for us in chat, throw them into the YouTube there, and we will read some of those out as well. Let me look at my hitter exposures. Who do I want to go with? Who do I want to go with? You know what's here's an interesting one. If you want to play a catcher that I think has upside, that the field is not going to be on for a very particular reason, and also is a home run upside. Like, this isn't the guy who's like most likely to home run on the slate, but I'm going to pick him here. How about Shea Langoliers as a pivot off of Soderstrom? Because he's going to be so popular at catcher, I think it's going to prohibit a lot of people from getting to Langoliers. It's only projected for 3% ownership. I think that's a way to really differentiate an A stack, is go Langoliers at catcher, don't have Soderstrom in it, and kind of look elsewhere.
I'm totally with you, but last I checked, I thought I saw Langoliers getting 10% ownership.
Oh, it must have gone up since I built lineups before.
I still get it though. I would like it more if Soderstrom was only catcher eligible, you know?
Yeah, because Soderstrom with the catcher and first base, that is going to be one of the reasons he gets 2 more. Yeah, we just had an ownership update from 1 minute ago. And Langoliers. Yeah,
like, I'm totally with you.
Before.
I'm totally with you that most people are just going to roster Soderstrom at catcher, especially people that aren't stacking Oakland. But just because he has that first base eligibility makes it so you can get to Langoliers also. Otherwise, I think Langoliers would be a lot less owned. But still, I think the point is very well taken.
And then one other stack Einstein asked us about was the Los Angeles Dodgers. I like the Dodgers a lot as a secondary stack. I always find them difficult to make 5-man stacks of. But yeah, the Dodgers against Jordan Hicks. I don't love the ballpark, but Hicks's underlying numbers, there's regression coming to him soon. And like, what better spot for him to start regressing than against the Dodgers? I'll be overweight to the Dodgers hitters individually. Like, I have a ton of exposure to Ohtani today.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's really hard to stack them. Like, you got to use 2 cheap pitchers for sure and punt your secondary stack, but they look really good as just individual hitters. I'm with you.
Let's see some home run picks from the also. Who you go? Official home run pick. What are you going with, Matt?
I'm going to go with the catcher from the other side of that game. Much better against right-handed pitching. Give me Yainer Diaz.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hey, another Houston Astros hitter. Clearly not the most likely players we're picking to hit home runs when we're going with catchers here, but if you get a home run out of the catcher spot, your lineup is certainly looking good. Mark Waldrop in the chat said, should we eat Soderstrom chalk? Says he's thinking about playing Arrighetti and him together. I wouldn't play Soderstrom and Arrighetti in the same lineup. I think it should be one or the other. As far as Soderstrom, yeah, like cash games, certainly play him. I'm not going to play him in single entry. He's going to be really popular, though. Large field tournaments, yeah, he's going to be hard to get away from at his price point, but not somebody I'm like dying to roster at 20% ownership. Home run picks from the chat. Sotex going with Kyle Tucker. Makes sense. Kyle Tucker seems to homer every single day. Flex has Willie Adames. Ice Through has got Joe Adell. Joe Adell's also been really good as of late. Slim Lancaster going with Shohei Ohtani. Sports Wiz has Kevin Pillar. Malucar has gotten away from Teoscar Hernandez. Give us Bryce Harper. Kenny Wayne, Ronald Acuna Jr. Sports Guy is going a double dong day for Tyler Soderstrom so that people could get upset on Twitter. Okay. Gambling Bandit, Brett Rooker. Michael Roundtree's got Manny Machado. Will the Bill is going with Alec Boehm. Jordan is going with Ohtani and Suzuki. What are we doing here? You picking Kurt Suzuki?
That's got to be Jordan Klein.
Say a Suzuki, Jordan. All right.
He's continuing on the theme from earlier.
Trying to go for some correlation. Adolis Garcia from Gary Famoso. Aaron Hines has got Josh Naylor. Andy Melman's got Zach Neto. CJ the Great's got Corbin Carroll. William Westry's gone with Mookie Betts. Lots of people now throwing Tatis and Peter Wasaki as well as Jimmy Jam. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, do us a big favor. like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, we've got our Edwards promo that is going to be ending on Friday. If you want to sign up for that, use the link that we have below. Right after us, we've got NBA Live Before Lock, and then following NBA Live Before Lock, the post-lock show. And oh boy, it looks like Donovan Mitchell potentially not playing today. I'm very annoyed by this. I was about to place some alt line bets on the Cavs players, and it looks like all the lines are going to come down now. So, guys, Donovan Mitchell might not be playing today. See what that means on NBA Live Before Lock right after this. Peace out. See you guys in an hour.